Hello, and welcome to Trip the Beltway Fantastic. On Monday, President Trump signed an agreement with Arab leaders that has been called a, quote, miracle and historic, that has so far paused the Israeli onslaught on the Gaza Strip and served to release the remaining Israeli hostages held by Hamas and upwards of 2,000 Palestinian prisoners from Israeli jails. Before attending the signing ceremony in Egypt on Monday, Trump was feted and triumphed by Israeli officials at the Knesset. Aside from bestowing on him the moniker President of Peace, they said he would be remembered, quote, as a giant of Jewish history, one for whom we must look back 2.5 millennia into the mists of time to find a parallel. Cyrus the Great. Donald Trump, you are a colossus who will join the pantheon of history, said Speaker Amir Ohana. Ohana referred to the 6th century BC Persian King who liberated the Jews from Babylonia to create their own self-governing province in the Persian Empire, also known as the Second Temple period. Benjamin Netanyahu was also met with thunderous applause and a long-standing ovation, as was Steve Witkoff, whose name was even chanted at a moment. In his own remarks, Trump went on for nearly an hour, charting the litany of things he had done for Israel since his first presidency, including recognizing the Israeli capital in Jerusalem, acknowledging right there that it was due to the aggressive lobbying of the billionaires Miriam and Sheldon Adelson. There were strange speeches overall, and that the word Palestinians only came up but once, even though the deal is to eventually afford them the same self-rule the Jewish people had enjoyed thanks to Cyrus in 540 BC. The speeches, too, mentioned very little about the United States other than it had given everything it could to the Israeli cause over the last 2 years. Trump even boasted that he had approved every single weapon that Netanyahu had asked for, even ones he never knew existed. This week, I bring in my friend Doug Macgregor because after the dust settles, one wonders what any of this has to do with America and the vaunted America First foreign policy that Trump had been promising since 2016. For the last 2 years, Americans have been told that this was, quote, our fight too, but it was never properly explained. It's been clear in polling that Americans haven't been so convinced either. Even Republicans have waned in their support for giving Israel everything it wanted, only to continue collective punishment with no sight and nothing in sight for the hostages or the hostage release. Today, Gaza is in ruins, and we are being told that it was worth it. So was it? I guess that's my first question to you, and welcome back to the show, Doug.
Yeah, well, thanks very much. President Trump tells us the war is over, peace is breaking out, and the foundations for perpetual peace or eternal peace, whatever he wants to cause it, are now being established. You know, if you're a Palestinian, I suppose you can say that you won because there are still lots of Palestinians who are alive who have not yet left or been driven out. So in that sense, was it a victory? Perhaps. Has Israel now abandoned all of its earlier goals and objectives as outlined at the beginning of this process? I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting question. How do you go from genocide to peace in the space of 24 hours? Does all the killing suddenly stop and peace break out? Excuse me, I'm a little skeptical. I have serious questions as to how much longer this can go on. One has to also ask whether or not, regardless of what President Trump says or does or what he thinks, are we dealing with more short-term thinking in Jerusalem? Are the Israelis, in fact, thinking tactically, not just strategically? Have they given up on the war with Iran? We know that Mr. Netanyahu asked Mr. Putin to pass the message to Iran that they no longer want war. I don't see much evidence that anybody in Tehran believes that. We seem to think that we've won a great victory because we've, at least in theory, organized all of the Arab states to tolerate Israel and oppose Iran. I don't think so. But, you know, most of the people that showed up to sign this document in Sharm el-Sheikh were people that, like the Egyptian leaders who are already getting billions of dollars every year from us, want to see the money continue and are probably willing to sign anything that provides for some at least temporary halt in the violence. So I guess we're going to have to wait and see. But we know President Trump, and President Trump is all about optics, and he wanted good optics. This is his moment in the sun. He had another moment in the sun just a few days ago when, like George C. Scott, who stood in front of the American flag and played Patton.
Yep.
Trump had an opportunity to play the same role in front of the flag and speak to everybody. Now he's parading around as the great peacemaker, which I privately think he desperately wants to be. I really believe that in the Middle East and in Eastern Europe. But is any of it real? Is it just glamour and glitter? It's too soon to tell. 5 Palestinians were killed within the last 24 hours by the Israelis. Ceasefires are hard things to implement. We'll just have to wait and see.
I have so many questions, and I know we have a limited amount of time. But as far as the second day of the ceasefire, the violence that you mentioned, the 5 Palestinians killed, some of the other reports indicate that there are Israel-backed gangs in the streets of Gaza. They've been there for quite some time, but now they are the ones that are fighting Hamas. Like the skirmishes that are breaking out now are between factions. Can you talk a little bit about how, if the Israelis want to undermine this deal, why it might be that they might choose to start supporting factions against Hamas rather than just dropping bombs on tent cities?
Well, at least for the moment, having failed to destroy Hamas, your best section option is to find other Muslim Arabs willing to work for you and attack Hamas. I think that's the case. I'm not familiar with all the details. I think Max Blumenthal is more familiar with the exact numbers of people and individuals involved. But we've done the same thing. I mean, we've operationalized or militarized various Arabs at different points in time. We certainly did that with Jolani in Syria. So did MI6 and Mossad. It seems reasonable that the Israelis would like to have some instrumentality at their disposal to maintain pressure on Hamas. And they're not too terribly worried about how many more Palestinians may accidentally die as collateral damage. I mean, I don't see any evidence for that. See, my view is the Israelis have not given up on the Greater Israel Project. That is alive and well. They're pausing. They're pausing for a whole range of reasons, not the least of which is that their own economy is in very poor shape. They need time to build up their military capacity. They're looking for aid and comfort once again from us, especially the population. But that doesn't change the larger set of goals and objectives. And I think they are going to go to war with Iran. Now, when does that happen? I thought it would have happened already, simply because Mr. Netanyahu is not insensitive to the loss in airspeed and altitude of support for Israel in the United States. Even the people that have been bought for hard cash that populate the Hill, they have to sort of re-examine the wisdom of continuing to take the cash if they risk not getting reelected as a result of supporting Israel too much. I don't think it's a problem yet, but I think they're on that road. So it's a balance. He has to strike a balance. We make some tactical withdrawals at this point. You know, you look at the various lines in and around Gaza. I don't know how meaningful that is. I mean, they'll pull back from some areas and not from others. Yeah. They'll wait. They'll refurbish and re-equip. They'll restore their intelligence apparatus that has really made a huge difference to what happens in Gaza. But then again, you've got the original goals and objectives. And the key question that Mr. Netanyahu and his friends always have to ask is how long can we depend upon effectively unconditional support from this president and from the United States? And that's going to drive everything that they do, because at some point they have to say it's use it or lose it. We'll never have a better deal than the one we've got right now. So we better damn well use it and drag the United States into it. Remember, we've already shipped a few hundred soldiers over there, yes, ostensibly for the purpose of implementing what comes out of Gaza. We have 2 THAAD batteries with troops manning those and radars. It's always in the interest of the smaller country to drag the bigger country in. I mean, it's not unique to Israel. They're just better at it than everybody else because they have so much support in the United States. So again, I think this is at least temporary, and I don't know how long it will last, but it's not permanent. And anybody who thinks it is probably smoking some of the wrong stuff.
Well, just getting back to these armed gangs, who, back in, the beginning of the summer, I recall they were being blamed for thwarting, aid coming in. So like they've been used all along by Israel as a way to deflect blame on why there's violence in the streets, why there's lawlessness, why aid isn't getting in. Could they also be used as an excuse for Israel ultimately going back in, or at least the deal not being able to be fulfilled in terms of the reconstruction and the governance and the peacekeeping operations? Because the violence on the ground will continue, and so that is an excuse to say, see, these Palestinians can't get along. They don't want reconstruction. They don't want to govern themselves. And Trump would likely indulge an excuse to not have to roll up his sleeves to actually get the dirty business of this deal done. Because if this deal were to go into effect, it would require mountains and mountains and mountains of diplomatic time and energy and resources. Wouldn't it be simpler just to say, look, they don't want peace. Let the Israelis continue what they were doing before October 14th.
Well, remember, Kelly, we had the equivalent of American mercenaries on the ground operating as NGOs,
Yes.
supposedly feeding people. They were actually involved in killing some of these Palestinians as well. But that cover was blown. Remember, we have a retired Army lieutenant colonel that came back and suddenly told the truth about what was really happening. And so you couldn't do that much longer. So now you turn instead to militarized Arabs from presumably Syria or Lebanon or somewhere that can be employed there and will do your bidding. And again, that's an instrument at their disposal. And you're right, they can always destroy people's character in public by saying, well, these Palestinians are incapable of governing themselves.
That's right.
They're barbarous, incompetent, corrupt, and so forth. Who is going to challenge that? Well, the question is, who owns the media? When you know who owns the media, there will be no challenge to that. We're already dealing with a carefully crafted narrative as it is. Every time we turn on the television or radio in the United States and you listen to the mainstream, you're listening to a narrative, a carefully crafted one designed to preserve support for Israel, enhance Israeli influence and power in the United States. So you're right. I don't have much hope that this will work. And you talked about the hard work of diplomacy. That certainly isn't something that President Trump likes. He doesn't like to invest a whole lot of time in study or preparation of any kind. He'd much rather bully and threaten, and he enjoys bullying and threatening as commander in chief. Now, he may not like a lot of killing. I believe that's probably true. But at the end of the day, how much is he actually affected by any of it?
Well, my next question goes to that point. One of the tropes that I've seen on social media in the last 24 hours is that Trump bombing Iran led to peace in Israel, and that all the naysayers, which would include me and maybe you and others who said he shouldn't bomb and bully Iran, that it would have regrettable outcomes, are now saying you guys have egg on your face because look, peace is breaking out in the Middle East because Trump took that bold stand. Can you talk to that a little? Because I saw that as like talking points that had been unleashed by, all of the paid Israel supporters here in the United States media.
Yeah, you mean you're not getting $7,000 a hit for putting something out on X that's pro-Israeli? I'm sorry to hear that. I think it's like saying that, well, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis and President Kennedy scared the Russians into compliance. And as a result, peace is going to be permanent. Well, what did we see in the aftermath of the Cuban Missile Crisis? Massive investment in nuclear weapons and in the building of a huge arsenal of nuclear missiles. That's how you ended up with the strategic arms limitations talks, because suddenly we realized these people have achieved parity. Well, I think you have a similar situation in Iran. They don't want to be caught again the way they were when we were negotiating with them and the Israelis struck them in a surprise assault. They don't want to have anything not work. So the investment in integrated air defenses is huge now. And in addition to that, the missile arsenal continues to expand. And there's no evidence that they're going to stop enriching uranium. Now, they have said they will not build a bomb. And thus far, I think all the intelligence agencies have suggested that's probably true. But we no longer have the access that we once did because the GCPOA was dropped. The IAEA is viewed as something that's unreliable, as an extension of the Mossad for all intents and purposes. But I think the Iranians are telling us the truth at this stage. At the same time, however, and this is what's really important against the backdrop of the supposed peace breaking out, you now have the Pakistanis. And remember, the Pakistanis have the Islamic bomb. This is a nuclear device that they developed, and they've always called it the Islamic bomb. Well, this is now at the disposal, we think, of the Saudis. We've always known that the Turks could turn to the Pakistanis for a nuclear weapon if they needed it. That's one of the reasons that Erdogan continually says, we know what you have and we're not afraid of it. His message is we can get it quickly if we need it. What else does that mean in the region? Who else may be interested in a nuclear weapon? Algeria? Libya? I mean, who knows? But the point is, I think the nuclear weapon issue is a major one for Israel. Whether or not the Israelis realize that they're in danger, serious danger now of losing their monopoly on nuclear weapons almost overnight, I don't know. That was always their rationale for attacking Iran. But if the Pakistanis are working that closely with the Saudis and potentially the Turks, I think their problem is much worse.
But is it? Now, the Washington Post came out with a piece that had got some access to some classified documents, rather, PowerPoint presentations on the, quote, regional security construct, which you and I know it has existed and, it has been talked about publicly by U.S. military officials, but it basically asserts that all of these Arab states, including Israel in concert with the United States, Qatar, Bahrain, Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE, have been working together throughout the Gaza war, even as these Arab states have been ostensibly against what Israel has been doing in Gaza. They've actually been working with the Israelis on heightening security, all with the agenda of providing some sort of hedge or isolating effect on Iran. So do these Arab states actually have any agency when it comes to Israel? Should Israel even be concerned about them because they're so cleaved to the United States and so intertwined with our military at this point? But even if they wanted to, they couldn't make a stand against Israel.
Well, I think the word duplicity has its origins in Arabic. If not in Arabic, then certainly in Hebrew. So I think everybody is lying to everybody about everything all the time. Without Qatar, there would be no Hamas. I mean, Hamas was originally stood up and funded by the Israelis, as we know, as a counterbalance to the PLO. But it has gotten most of its cash and support really out of Qatar. And Qatar has
with Netanyahu facilitating that pipeline, though, for the reasons why you outlined.
Right. So the question is any of that now going to change? This is somebody said to me years ago, the Middle East is like a barrel of eels. If you reach in there, pulling anyone out is going to be a tricky situation because they're all slimy. I think that probably describes the situation in the Middle East. But at the same time, I don't think any of the Arabs harbor any illusions about the Israelis. And they certainly are very acutely sensitive to the Greater Israel Project. That encompasses half of Saudi Arabia, a large chunk of Syria, southern Lebanon, the Sinai, part of Egypt. I don't think they see any evidence that the Israelis have permanently abandoned that. So I think we live in a permanent state of deception
Yeah.
confusion, and war in the region. And what we have done now, or what President Trump has done now, is looks great for the moment. How long it will last is a question none of us can really answer. The other thing is that, relations between the various oil sheikdoms in the Persian Gulf and Iran are not really bad. They are not really on side with us against Iran. They just want to survive. And they know that Iran has the capacity to obliterate them in the space of an afternoon. They know that we can obliterate them in the same space of an afternoon. So what do? They all play all sides to the middle. So again, let's be grateful for the ceasefire. I'm glad these people have all been released from captivity. Israeli Jews and the Arabs and the Palestinians and others who've been sitting in captivity. It's not going to last.
Which brings me to my last question, looping back to my initial query, which is, what is America first about this? How should we look upon this? Does this connect to our security, our safety, our prosperity at all? And if so, has Trump actually articulated that? Because I wasn't hearing it yesterday in any of the speeches from the Knesset.
I think you and I and most Americans live on a plantation where we work hard and strive, but we are controlled largely by financial giants who live in New York City or operate out of Wall Street. Some of them are also in the city of London. The whole effort against Russia in Ukraine has been about stripping Russia's resources away from it, dividing the country, balkanizing it, replacing its rulers, and so forth, so that we could get in there and extract all the wealth that we possibly could. That has failed. That's not going to happen. We have now turned back to the Middle East again with the goal of dealing decisively with Iran. Iran is a huge stumbling block. We would like to control their oil and natural gas. We think we control the oil and natural gas in the Arabian Peninsula, but it's not so clear because they do have the means to turn away from us. They can turn to the Russians, they can turn to the Chinese and the Iranians. But at least for the moment, we think we have them bullied into submission. So what are we doing in Venezuela now all of a sudden? We're certainly not going down there for our health. We're not going down there to establish liberal democracy. We have a very real interest in the oil and gas. We want absolute control over that. We've turned away any compromise solutions and offers of trillions in terms of a stake in Venezuela's oil and gas production that came to us from Maduro. So we seem to want to go into that place. What is this all about? I think it's all about the people that really govern us. And they're not sitting in Congress. They're not even in the White House. They're taking their orders from the people on Wall Street and the City of London who own everything. And they're very worried about their very fragile condition. I mean, our financial situation in the United States and in Western Europe is very brittle. So how do you fix it? How do you recapitalize? You got to go somewhere and get something. And that tends to be oil, gas, whatever other mineral wealth there may be available. So we're very focused on that still in the Middle East. I think we're very focused on it in Venezuela.
It would seem to me that you could get all of that by really shrewd negotiation, trade agreements, and diplomacy, and not war.
I agree, but nobody seems to be interested in taking that approach. And this is part of the arrogance that lies at the heart of all of this behavior. We want to beat people into submission. It's not enough to buy them. It's not enough to bribe them. We want absolute control because at the end of the day, we're trying to preserve our military hegemony around the world. You can't preserve that hegemony unless you demonstrate conclusively that you can enforce it. It's a very strange set of circumstances, and it's not American at all. It's not something that we in the United States were ever interested in doing. This is something very foreign to us, but it's now institutionalized. And I don't hear any debates on the Hill about it. I don't hear anyone raise objections to it. And the average American, though they have figured out that none of this has to do with America first, is asleep. The average American, as long as he, as a friend of mine says, as long as I can go down, pick up a 6-pack of beer or a case of beer, drive my car home, watch the game tonight, continue to draw pay at some job that keeps me in a house and at least 2 automobiles, well, then I don't care what they do. And I think that's another sad variable in this equation.
It seemed to me that Trump had been at least articulating a vision that was moving away from this military hegemony. But now the excuse is, well, he needs to do it in the hemisphere, in our backyard, because of Monroe Doctrine, whatever. Are you buying this argument from some conservatives that maybe not hegemony over there and primacy over there, but in our own backyard, it's necessary for us to follow this more aggressive military approach with Maduro and others?
Well, what you're asking is it necessary for us to suppress the people of Latin America and demonstrate that we are technologically, militarily, and politically and economically vastly superior to them? My answer is no. And in fact, I think if we go into Venezuela, it could spark what I would call a Latin American reaction against us that spreads across Central America and much of South America. I'm told that there are already paramilitaries, and there's at least several 100,000 in the continent, but at least 100,000 in Brazil, that are gearing up to go into Venezuela to help their friends in Venezuela against the Yankees. And then, of course, you've got the Colombia and the drug cartels. They're the ones really that if you're interested in attacking someone and you want to find a reason to do so, you might start there. But you could make the same argument in Mexico. Now the Mexican drug cartels are announcing they're just trying to kill Americans. I think all of this could go south very, very quickly. It is good to see that the 101st Air Mobile Division's headquarters is now on the border with Mexico. We always had someone commanding forces on the border. John Pershing was in command down there before World War I. We've had forces on that border from 1846 to 1948. That makes sense. That's what we should do. Guard our borders and our coastal waters. But intervene in Venezuela? This country is roughly the size of Germany and France combined, with almost 30 million people. How many of them live in poverty? If we invade that place, we're going to make ourselves responsible for it. How many millions of those people will be happy to make themselves entirely dependent upon us? You've got several million people down there that are at the subsistence level, that go through the garbage to find something to eat. I'm sure they'd be happy to take whatever they could get from us. But that doesn't mean they'll be our friends or love us. And that doesn't mean we won't encounter an insurgency. I mean, Venezuela is one of those places. It's a lot like the Middle East in the sense that McNamara asked General Lemnitzer, who was the supreme commander of Europe back in 1964, just before 65, how long will it take us to get the 101st into Vietnam? He said, I don't know, not long. He said, the real question is, how long is it going to take us to get it out again? Of course, McNamara didn't like that answer and hung up the phone. That was the end of it. Thanks, General, for your interest in national defense. Lemnitzer was right. We should be asking that question right now about Venezuela. But I'm sure somebody will come on television and tell us that this is all surgical. We know what that means. You might as well bomb Dresden. It's all nonsense. There's no such thing as surgical in any war. So where are we headed? I think we're temporarily going to enjoy a respite from fighting in the region, the Middle East, but there is no permanent peace. We're going to turn our attention now to Venezuela. But that doesn't mean that war won't still break out in the future against Iran, particularly if it becomes Israel's goal and objective again to do that. We are still at their beck and call. That's what Americans need to realize. Americans haven't yet completely grasped that. I don't think President Trump is a free agent. I think he is surrounded by people who are driving him in particular directions. That's all. And that's where we are. So until the population at large wakes up to this, this will continue.
Well, thank you, Doug. And I think we'll just keep hammering at that with the American people, our audience. We're going to keep reminding them. And I appreciate you coming on the show again. And I hope you come back to talk more about Venezuela as developments roll out there.
Yeah, will be interesting to see. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.